Russ Rogers here from the 17 Law Studio, and today I want to focus on communication. And I know that everyone wants to communicate better, but this is so much deeper than that. You think you're fixing a problem, and the next thing you know, your wife is mad at you, or you say something that you think will help, and your husband's offended, or you thought one thing is going to happen, but the opposite happened, and you're wondering, man, did I marry an idiot? How could he not see that? We'll talk about how people are different. Not that one is better than the other, just different. We'll talk about some people like red cars, some like blue cars. Some people are hot natured, some are cold natured. Some people like to read, some hate to read. Some people like spicy foods and some hate it. Some love to eat dessert first, like me, and some can't stand the idea. Some people are morning people, and some people like to stay up late. It's like I can't tell him anything or tell her anything without it turning into a big old mess. You work so hard on something and your husband or wife hardly even notice, and you're thinking, what the heck? And things like this happen all the time. My wife or husband keeps doing things for me I don't like and won't do for me the things I do like, and they get mad at me if I don't appreciate it. This is crazy. Communication is huge in a marriage, but when you understand it and it becomes a way of life for you, you will see your relationship flourish like you've never thought possible. I cannot possibly cover everything in one show, but I'm going to cover a lot in this show, and I think you'll be able to take some things with you today to use. If you have been in any relationship whatsoever, then you've experienced communication issues. So let me start by sharing some thoughts on this. First of all, you're not alone. 90% of relationships have communication issues, and the other 10% are liars. Secondly, there's so much to communication that you can't listen to one show and think you have it all figured out. Once you think you got it figured out, your spouse will throw you a curveball and you'll step right into a huge mess. I love the old Chinese proverb that said the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the second best time to plant a tree is today. Today, we're going to start planting your communication tree. I also need to answer the question I get a lot, and that's, hey, Russ, tell me the main thing I need to know about communication. And of course, my answer always is there's not one main thing. There are lots of main things you need to wrap your mind around, and we're going to cover some of those today. If you want to get married and stay married, you will no doubt find that learning to be the best communicator is key to a happy marriage and a key to a marriage that lasts. If you've been in a relationship any length of time at all, you probably are already doing some things right. For example, you say something and your wife gets mad at you. You'll probably learn not to say that anymore. So just by the school of hard knocks, you're figuring out what to do and what not to do to a certain extent. However, this is limited to certain situations, and it's a horrible and painful way to navigate learning communication skills. So let's get started with some practical learning. Here we go. Please understand that God made you and your spouse to be different. Your likes and dislikes are often different than your spouse. Neither is good or bad, just different. For example, I think Tracy and I are probably both morning people, but I'm more of a morning person than she is. She likes to get up, go straight for a cup of coffee, relax, read, pray, visit, and at some point she'll want to eat breakfast and get started for her day. As for me, I wake up, I'm full speed ahead. I'm going for the gym, go for a run. I immediately put on my running clothes. I'm out the door within 10 minutes. If I'm going straight to my office, then I'm immediately in the shower, get ready, and I'm out the door in under 30. So here's the rub. It drives her crazy to have to get ready and head out the door right away, and it drives me crazy to sit around and wait. So who's right? Which is best? Both of us are neither right or wrong. We're just different. Many people like red cars, some like blue cars. Some people like light colored cars like white, and some like dark colored cars like black. Here's the rub. I like white vehicles. Tracy likes black. But if I buy her a white one because I like white, there'll be a certain amount of lack of appreciation. Deep down, she realized I bought her what I liked and not what she liked. I want to touch on this in more depth in just a moment. But for now, in the context of communication, we may frustrate each other unless we realize that we were just made different. And just because I like something doesn't mean she likes something. For example, I'm ready to go first thing, and it can be frustrating because I can assume that Tracy is communicating to me that she really doesn't care about me, or she's wasting time, or whatever the case may be. Or I can just take it, she's just different. Tracy can assume I'm communicating to her that I'm a slave driver and I'm just about getting out the door and getting something done without any consideration for what she likes. Or she can just assume that we're different. Neither of us is right, neither wrong, just different. You may be looking at me like I just grew another head on my shoulder. So what the heck does this have to do with communication with my spouse? Well, this is my first point, and I really hope you get it. You may want to write this down. People believe more of what they see than what they hear. You may think that your only form of communication with your spouse is your words, but in reality, that's the smallest part of how you communicate. You communicate with your finances, how you dress, your overall actions toward each other, your time, and every other aspect of life. For example, if you tell your wife you love her, but your actions don't back that up, what is she going to believe? Of course she's going to believe your actions and not your words, because people believe more what they see than what they hear. If you tell your wife that you love her and enjoy spending time with her, and yet you spend more time with your buddies than her, what is she going to believe? Well, she's going to believe the obvious, and that you really are communicating to her that your buddies are more important to you than she is. You communicate while eating dinner. If you are on the phone while eating dinner, you're communicating to everyone at the table that everything but dinner with your family is the most important thing to you. You're communicating while you're driving. If you drive like a sane person, no matter what happens, you're communicating to your family that you have self-control, love in your heart, joy for others. And of course, if you're yelling at the drivers, honking the horn, you're communicating that you need some anger classes. Again, my point is, you have to understand that you're always communicating. And if you're relying only on your words and believe that people are supposed to believe your words and not your actions, well, you're an idiot. Not too long ago, Tracy made something that I really didn't like, but I ate it anyway. She asked me how I liked it, and I lied like a dog and told her, it was fine, loved it. And as you can imagine, the following several minutes was wrapped around how she could tell I didn't like it, and I was trying to convince her that I did. Oh, you really don't like it, do you? Is it too salty? What is it that you don't like? It was obvious that my whole body and my facial expressions, all the evidence I had, other than my words, was convincing to her that, I really didn't like it. I finally confessed that I didn't care for it, and we laughed about it. But again, we communicate more with our body language and our actions than our words. So if I say with a big smile, I don't really like you, or a mean face, like I do this, like, I love you so much. You see, this is silly. You're going to believe what you see. You're not going to believe what I'm telling you. We are always communicating, and we communicate more with everything but words. So I'm going to talk about communication for several shows, though they all may not be in a row. So please stay tuned for all of them. But for this show, I want to dive a bit deeper on what I started talking about, and that is we're all different. Tracy's personality, way of thinking, preferred way of processing information are all different than mine. Not bad, just different. One of those ways we're different are love languages. I don't want to teach a class today on love language, but I want you to please promise me that you'll go online and see what your love languages are and what your spouse's love languages are. So in the world of love language, well, it's really how God made us to receive and show love. That's what a love language is. I'm mainly concerned with how you receive love today, or how your spouse receives love. For example, if I ask you, would you rather receive a present from your spouse, or have your spouse do something for you, or have your spouse say something super nice about you, or have your spouse just sit and enjoy time with you, what would you choose? Of those options, receiving a present, doing something for you, or saying something super sweet about you or to you, or just hang out with you, which one sounds like the most fun, the most fulfilling? Well, which one you choose is an indicator of your love language. It's how you receive love. If my spouse does this for me, then I feel loved. If he doesn't, I don't feel loved. Since you really can't answer me live right now on which one you choose, let's assume you said that you wanted your spouse to spend time with you. It doesn't matter what you do together as long as you're together. What you're saying is that of all the things your spouse could do to make you feel loved, you're saying that spending time with you, just hanging out, just being together, that's what would make you feel the most loved. So that what you're saying is that your main love language is quality time. You may still enjoy receiving gifts or somebody doing something for you or one of the others, but it's mainly quality time. So let me share this with you because I married a quality time girl. She's all about the quality time, and I'm all about it too. Tracy enjoys receiving gifts, but if I bought her stuff and never spent time with her, then I would be communicating to her that I really don't love her. That's how she would take that. Specifically, if I only gave her gifts and didn't spend time with her, she would take it that I'm communicating to her that I don't love her, but in my mind, I might be communicating to her that I love her so much that I'm buying flowers, chocolates, a new car, and perhaps a puppy. And I don't know, she might get upset if I got her a puppy. I might buy her a new car thinking I deserve the Husband of the Year award. But she's not about receiving gifts, and she's all about the quality time. So in order for me to be in the running for the Husband of the Year award, in addition to buying the car, I better spend some time with her. You may be thinking, that she'd be crazy if she didn't appreciate a new car. And you'd be right. She would appreciate it. But if I bought her a car and never spent time with her, she would not feel loved by me. So in your case, if you happen to have the love language of receiving gifts, then you would think getting a new car would be a great way to feel loved. And every time you got in it, you would feel loved. But you're different than my wife, Tracy. Now hang in there with me as I try to tie all this together for you today. This is huge. And again, I start at the top. I run into this every couple I talk to. So my top love language is words of affirmation. This means I would rather you tell me how wonderful I am than buy me a gift. In fact, receiving gifts is at the bottom of my list. You really don't have to tell me how wonderful I am, but I do enjoy people talking good about me or to me. I appreciate that. If you bought me a new car, I'd appreciate it, but I wouldn't necessarily feel love long term by getting a new car. Sure, I'd feel love that day that you gave me a new car, but 2 months later, if you didn't show me any love any other way, perhaps words of affirmation, then I wouldn't really feel loved. So if you're thinking that the new car would make me feel love for the rest of the year, you would be wrong. So here's a quick reminder of all the love languages. One is receiving gifts. Next one, quality time, words of affirmation, acts of service, and physical touch. I don't want to sound too redundant, but the reason I'm talking about love language is the same context of communication is because when a couple comes to me and they're at each other's throats, most of the time, if they had a deep understanding of love languages, this probably wouldn't be the situation. One spouse will say, well, he just doesn't understand. And she would be correct. He doesn't understand. And that's why we're discussing that right now. Now, once you take the love language test, it will start to make so much more sense when you discover what your love language is. By the way, if you look up 5 Love Language Quiz by Gary Chapman, you can complete a quick quiz and you'll find out where you land. There are 5 love languages, and no matter where you are in the country, the culture, where you live in the world, these love languages are true. You don't have to believe them, but just because you don't believe them doesn't make them less true. Let me share with them again. Acts of service and receiving gifts, quality time, words of affirmation, and physical touch. I want to touch on all these. Here are some quick definitions, and then I want to talk more about why they are so important. But you need to know what they are before we talk about that. Acts of service. That just means you feel loved when someone does something for you. That could be mow the yard, clean up the kitchen, put the kids to bed, wash the car, plan a trip. For example, although this is not at the top of my list, it's on the list. If Tracy planned the perfect romantic evening for me, I would certainly feel loved, assuming acts of service was high on my list, which it's probably in the middle. Receiving gifts means you feel loved by receiving gifts. The myth on this one is that you think people think it has to be expensive and gift wrapped all the time. You can get real creative and not spend any money at all. Next one is quality time, and it means just that, quality time. You feel loved by your spouse when they spend time with you. This doesn't mean you have to be doing something special, but do have to be together. If you are together and one of you is on your iPhone and the other iPad, and well, that's really not it. Quality time means you're together mentally, physically, and emotionally. I'll go into this more later since I've had to really pay attention to this one. Now, next one is words of affirmation. Literally means that you feel loved by people noticing and the positive things about you and sharing those thoughts with and about you. So they're noticing the positive things about you. These are not fake compliments, but rather someone finding the best in you and sharing the best of you with you. I'm a words of affirmation guy. So recently I worked really hard on a project and someone recognized how much effort I put into the project and shared that with me. It was so refreshing hearing that someone noticed that. And yes, I felt appreciated and loved. But the last one is physical touch. This means you feel loved by being touched. The love language of physical touch is holding hands, sitting close to each other, arms around you, snuggling, sit on the couch. And keep in mind, this does not mean sex. While it could obviously lead to sex, it's certainly not. It's certainly a part of it, obviously, since you're touching during sex, but it's more of a touching each other throughout the day, rubbing shoulders, hands on her leg or his leg, hugging while kissing, a hug while walking into the room, lots of kisses throughout the day, physical touch. Now, to keep us all on the same page, we are always communicating, and your spouse will believe more what they see than what you say. And this is all seen through love languages. So I hope this is starting to make more sense. And those love languages, we are all different. So we receive communication based on how we were made. If you show me love like I was made to feel loved, then I will feel loved. If you show me love based on how you want to show love, unless it matches up with how I was made, I'll not receive love. Okay, to make this so much more sense, let me share some good examples of how all this works. How all this works with your spouse, how it can work super well, and how it can go really sideways, and you not even know why it's gone sideways. If you have no idea what your love language is, and you won't take the test anymore, or won't take the test anytime soon for whatever reason, let me give you some general thoughts. Chances are your wife has quality time in the top 2 of her love languages. Chances are your husband has words of affirmation in his top 2. This may not be true for you, but if I was going to gather 100 men and 100 women, in my experience, and if I had to guess, most women have quality time in the top 2, and most men have words of affirmation in the top 2. I've seen physical touch all over the place and receiving gifts all over the place, but quality time and words of affirmation, typically the top 2 I see the most. Not every time, but most. Acts of service is typically high in one spouse or the other, and you can seldom go wrong with doing something special for your spouse, so keep that in mind. Let me share some real life stuff. As a refresher, Tracy, at the top of her list, quality time is at the very top of her list. At the top of my list is words of affirmation. Early on in our marriage, I knew nothing about love languages. I would call her all the time and tell her how much I loved her and appreciated her, but I was so absorbed in work and stuff that it didn't even cross my mind she wanted me to spend time with her. As long as she knew I loved her with all the material needs met, I assumed all was well. Fortunately, early in our marriage, I wanted to become a student of marriage, learn all I could about relationships and parenting, and early on, I came across the concept of love languages, and I am so grateful I learned about this super early in our marriage and didn't find out until it was too late. By too late, I mean, I'm glad I didn't find out when I was being served divorce papers like a lot of marriages. On a side note, If you're on a second or third marriage, I'm not in judgment mode at all. I'm more in the mode of, hey, let's learn about this stuff. So this is your last marriage. Let's make this marriage the best marriage ever so that everyone who sees you will assume you're on your honeymoon everywhere you go. Okay, back to quality time. I can't tell you how many times I've been with couples whose marriage is on the rocks over quality time. Guys go to work, come home, feel as though they worked hard and deserve a break and some fun time. This fun time is often golf, hunting, or just wanting to relax and watch TV. This also spills over to the weekend where the guys commit to their day off doing something with all the guys while the wife is at home with the kids. Men will say, well, I'll work all week, put a roof over your head, make sure there's plenty of food, so don't I deserve some me time? Well, many times a husband grew up in a home where this is how the family operated, so this line of thinking is merely repeating itself. What perpetuates this is that the wife is not feeling love. So when the husband does decide to come around, she's letting him know she doesn't feel loved, and he calls that nagging. The circular relationship makes him want to not come home anymore and makes her feel less loved, and before you know it, they call it quits. I'll come back to this, but I need to pause and share some truth that you really want to make note of, and that is this seriously huge. Your spouse was made to receive love in a certain way, and because of that, your spouse is looking for and expecting to be loved that way. Here's the news you need to remember. Most of the time, they will find it. And sometimes will be with you, and sometimes that won't be with you. It's up to you if they find it in you. In the case of quality time, your wife is going to find someone to spend quality time with. And hopefully, you will be that person if you decide that. If it's not you, then it's not the most healthy relationship for the marriage. Here's where I see people finding quality time, and specifically with wives. And keep in mind, this does not mean it leads to an affair. First, I see it with the children. If dad isn't around, then mom pours her life into her children. And for a time period, this works, but merely kicks the can down the road. Because when the children get a little older, a little more independent, a little less dependent on mom, then that brings the need back to the relationship. And the husband's with the husband back in play. And unless the husband has come to his senses, the need is still there by the wife, and it's not being fulfilled by the one person who is supposed to fill that need. Sometimes I see women pouring their lives into other women who are in the same situation where their husband is not around much. This is certainly understandable, but not the way it's supposed to be. Another huge way I see men and women respond to this is pouring their lives into their careers. Often they use the excuse, well, I'm working so that one day we'll be able to do this or that. But in reality, they're being fulfilled at work instead of at home. And they're feeling appreciated and loved through their career and not by their spouse. Obviously, none of these alternatives are healthy. So what I'm saying is that we find a way to be loved, and it's my prayer that it's with your spouse. Okay, back to quality time as a primary love language. Okay, you see that if your spouse has quality time as a love language, then you need to be sure you are paying attention to that. This does not mean you can't play golf or go hunting or never hang out with your buddies. This does not mean you will never spend you have to spend every moment with your spouse. I don't have a measurement of this, or is it 70-30 or 85-15, but rather you'll know by how your relationship is going. Again, this does not have to be all the time, and while spending hours is a good thing, there are times where a few minutes makes all the difference in the world. For example, sometimes I'll meet Tracy for lunch when I know that I may not see her that evening for whatever reason. Sometimes we will take a trip to get some coffee or just chat. Sometimes, although I'm ready to run out the door in the morning, I'll take some time and enjoy some coffee with her for 30 minutes or so. I don't do this to check a box. I don't do this. I only do this because I love her and I want her to feel loved. And also, when I do spend time with her, I enjoy it. And the more time I spend with her, the more I want to spend with her, and realize quality time is not in my top 2 love languages. But I love her so much that making sure she feels loved and is loved is a huge deal to me. I spend time with Tracy not because I'm worried about her having an affair or pouring her life into a career, but rather I spend time with her because she's that important to me, and because she's that important to me, there's no thoughts of her having an affair or me having an affair or either one of us doing something that would harm our marriage. It's not even a thought that crosses our minds. It's kind of like, do you eat right and exercise to keep from getting fat, or do you eat right and exercise because it's the right thing to do? And because you're doing the right thing and that's what's best by default, you don't get fat? I think that's how it works. I hope I've sold you on the fact that if you married a quality time person, you need to spend quality time with that person. Okay, let's just go into the other love language. And since I mentioned that most guys have words of affirmation in their top two, let's chat about that one next. I'm a words of affirmation guy, so I know all about this one. I want to share with you what it is and what it's not. But first, I want to share with you what it's not. And like I did with quality time, I'll share with you the good that comes from paying attention to this love language and the bad that comes from it when you don't. Okay, the love language of words of affirmation is not false flattery. It's not blowing smoke at someone to try to make them feel good. Have you been working out today? Oh, wow, you are so smart. Oh, how did you get so smart? Oh man, you're looking so good today. That's not it at all. So if you're tossing out insincere compliment like you are trying to pick them up at a bar or something like that, that's not going to be received well. Okay, that's what it's not. Words of affirmation really is just that. Words of affirmation is finding the best in someone and pointing it out. It could be what they're wearing. It could be a decision they made or something they accomplished. Every day when I walk out the door, Tracy says, "Oh, you look nice today." And I always love hearing that. A friend of mine made something for Christmas, and I made a huge deal out of it. I didn't make a huge deal because he's a words of affirmation guy, but as soon as I made a huge deal out of it, based on his reaction, I was reminded that he's a words of affirmation guy. And from time to time, Tracy will send me a text that says something like, "Hey, I wanted to let you know how much I appreciate you working so hard for us and provide for us like you do." And I thought, man, that's good stuff right there. Or she'll say, "Oh, the yard looks great. Oh, wow, this dinner is awesome. Oh my goodness, that dress looks amazing on you. I appreciate you having a conversation with our child. They really listen to you. You do a great job of loving our children, and I know they appreciate it. You share great wisdom with our neighbor when you help them with their problem." Okay, I could go on and on with examples, but I need to share a little deeper about words of affirmation. First, you, the spouse, needs to be the one giving the words of affirmation, because to refresh your mind, these are not shallow compliments. These are ways your spouse feels loved. And if you don't show them love like they are made to feel loved, you'll have issues. Your spouse will feel loved by whoever gives them the words of affirmation. And it's my prayer that it's you. If you don't show them love and someone else does, then over time that leads down a path of destruction. Let's go with an example I've witnessed way too many times. A guy comes home, doesn't receive words of affirmation, and at work, where he spends most of his time, some good-looking girl who's unhappy with her husband is giving all the words of affirmation to your husband. That makes him feel super loved. Over time, he will resent his wife and start having feelings for a person showing him the love. I know what you're thinking. Well, what if my husband doesn't deserve the words of affirmation? He's not being nice. He's not being the guy he promised he would be at the altar. So how do I do this? Well, I have a whole chapter on this in my marriage book, and I'll address more in another show. But as a quick and probably vague answer, it's twofold. Yes, the husband needs to be doing the things to make him worthy of words of affirmation. However, if he's not, then it is because he doesn't feel loved. Possibly. Perhaps you may have to show him some love so that he'll be a better person. There's more to it than this. But when anyone doesn't feel love, they don't make the best decisions for a relationship. Again, people will find someone to love them like they were made to feel loved, and hopefully it will be with their spouse. When I see people with words of affirmation love language, they tend to avoid people who are critical of them and are attracted to people who talk good about them and to them. This absolutely does not mean that you can't address issues, but addressing issues can't be the norm. To help you with words of affirmation, people, you need to choose your words carefully and learn to be a diplomat. For example, your spouse messed up something, perhaps rather than you pointing out that they messed it up, you could say, "Hey, honey, great job on putting the playground together for the children. You probably already know this, or the dog may have moved it when you weren't looking. But I found some screws in the yard that looked important, and I wanted you to have them. I'm sure you have it under control, no worries. But if you want me to help find out where they go, or if there are extras, I'm happy to do so." Or here's a bad example. "Hey, before you put up the tools, you need to find out where these screws go." Okay, so why the two examples? Why is the second one really that bad? Well, first of all, there needs to be some recognition, some love or respect. Your husband just spent 8 hours putting together a playground, and you need to acknowledge his work because he feels loved when that's the case. Secondly, you don't want to accuse him of being stupid by missing a screw or two, that he needs to be able to save face and give him the benefit of the doubt that some screws were dropped accidentally, or maybe they had extras. Another example. Let's say your wife is a words of affirmation person and she cooks you a huge breakfast and burns a biscuit. You can spend the entire morning talking about the biscuits being burned, or you can focus on how sweet it was to prepare a huge breakfast with all the yummy items on the table. You can also choose to never bring up the burned biscuits, or you can choose to drive a wedge in your relationship, laughing about it with your friends and your neighbors as you tell stories in the future. Good example. "Oh, baby, the biscuits are my fault because I probably got you distracted. It's okay. The rest looks so good, I probably wouldn't even have room for it anyway." Bad example. "Well, you could bake more, but the rest of the food would get cold, and also I'm in a bit of a hurry." Another good example. "Wow, this looks like a page out of Southern Living magazine. Actually, the biscuits don't look bad at all. I like to cover mine with honey, so no worries. Wow, you're so sweet to do this for me. I may be the most blessed husband on earth." Okay, let me move on to another language. Let's touch on physical touch for a few minutes. Like I mentioned earlier, it's not all about sex, although you are obviously touching during sex. This is walking in the front door from work, hugging your spouse, giving them a big old passionate kiss, lifting them off the floor. This is lighting up when she walks in the room or he walks in the room and you give him a big old hug. It's when you're at home with a bunch of people and you invite around and your wife sits in your lap no matter how old you are. It's rubbing each other's shoulders while you cook dinner, snuggling on the couch while watching a movie. It's holding hands in public. It's some spicy touching, patting, grabbing interaction when no one's looking. I think you know what I mean. So here's the rub, and it's a big deal. If you don't pay attention to your spouse, who had this at the top two of how they feel loved, then if someone else starts doing the touching, it can get sideways in a hurry. You do not want others touching your spouse anyway, but especially when one of their main love languages happens to be physical touch. I want to touch base on acts of service because, again, it's usually in the top two of one of the spouses. This is helping around the house. This is helping with the kids, cleaning out the car, washing the car, you name it. Just doing things that your spouse would normally have to do, but you completed the task because you love your spouse. For guys, if you can help when you get off work, or help with the kids, help do the dishes, or heck, maybe even get out the vacuum from time to time when you get a chance. You can make something for your wife, fix her favorite dinner, her favorite drink, arrange for her for a fun date with you perhaps, and leave the kids with somebody else. Fixing whatever is broken that is driving her crazy. This could be an appliance, her car, or whatever it is that you hear her get upset because it doesn't work. Okay, ladies, planning the perfect date, making a really special lunch for him to take to work, making his clothes look great, organizing something he's putting off, or just about anything you think he would appreciate having done so he doesn't have to do it himself. So here's the rub. When acts of service is not paid attention to, you'll hear things like, "Do I have to do everything? Why can't you see I need some help?" Over time, resentment sets in. The good news is that all this is typically free and merely takes time. All right, the last gift before we close is receiving gifts. And while I'm sure it happens, I've yet to see one of these at the top of someone's list. When it's at the top three, you need to make sure it's a part of your life. The good news is that it doesn't have to be expensive. And in fact, there's a fine line between acts of service and receiving gifts. And here's some ideas. Leaving a note with your spouse that we'll find later in the day, or leaving a note in your spouse's suitcase if they're traveling, and they'll find it when they get to the hotel. You can wrap stuff that you already have in the house, maybe an old trinket or something that reminds you of a date or maybe a trip or something. You can buy something at the dollar store with a nice note that you were thinking of them. Flowers and her favorite candy will always go over well. This can be expensive flowers or cheap flowers, or you can go out in the yard and get some, as long as she knows that you're thinking of her. And since this is not a love language, typically at the top, this is not something you have to do every day. So please don't put that pressure on yourself. And remember, it does not have to be expensive. Okay, there's so much more, but there's only so much time. So let me share some rules on love language before we close. Whether you agree with it or not, it doesn't change the fact that whatever love language your spouse has is real to them. You may not care about quality time, but it's real to them. You may not care about words of affirmation and just think everyone else is too sensitive, but it's real to them. There is a harsh side of love languages, such as words of affirmation people. If you use harsh words, it takes them longer to get over the hurt of harsh words. If you touch a physical touch person inappropriately, it takes them longer to get over that because the wounds cut deep. There's more, but you get the idea that misusing love languages has consequences too. Here's some encouragement. I don't pay attention to Tracy's love languages because I feel obligated. I do it because I love her. I want what's best for her, and it's important to her. And because it's important to her, it's important to me. And what I found that the more I pay attention to her love languages, the more she pays attention to mine. And the more she pays attention to my love languages, the more I pay attention to her love languages. I love it when a plan comes together. Back to what I started. Also remember that you are always communicating, and your spouse will believe more of what they see from you than what they hear. Whew. The time has flown by. I didn't even touch as much as I wanted to. So pay attention to the following episodes of the following shows, because I'm going to go even deeper on some other topics. And to be fair, I got a little sidetracked and I got into the weeds a little bit on love languages, but I really think it's time spent. No kidding. Love languages is something I discuss with just about every couple I come across because it's that important. I think I'll call this show Communication Part 1, since I'll dive into communication in the next shows. But when you have a moment, check out the 17laws.com. You can read and sign up for my blog. Order the books, 17 Laws of Parenting, 17 Laws of Marriage. Check out the Marriage Commitment Challenge coin. You're going to love that, and I'll see you next time.